Genshin Impact's version 5.7 will have tons of great 5 stars to wish for, but with all the different options and the controversy about the changes to one of the characters, a lot of people are having trouble deciding who they want. That's why in this video we'll go over Skirk, Emilie, Mavuika, and Shenhe's strengths, weaknesses, and overall value for your account. After a brief explanation of how each character works, they will receive a rating from bad to great in several categories, including personal damage, support capability, team flexibility, free-to-play friendliness, and overall value. That way you'll have a better understanding of these characters and who would actually be helpful for you, or if you'll end up being disappointed with them. I'll also give some characters that pair well with each of these 5 stars, since everyone's account is different, and it's important to know if a character that is good in general is actually good for you. With that being said, if there is someone you really want, then there's nothing wrong with wishing for them. This guide is designed to help you figure out what these characters can do well, and what they struggle with so you can be best prepared to play them at their maximum potential. Keep in mind that Skirk is new, so we will have to fully test her, but with the information we have already, we can give her a proper evaluation. Make sure to like this video if it helps, and share it with anyone who may be wondering about who to wish for, and with that, let's get started. Let's now talk about the void-rending, dimension-shattering cryo DPS, Skirk. Skirk is a cryo damage dealer who you'll mainly play as an on-field DPS, but she can be used as a burst support because her elemental burst does hit really hard. Her main playstyle revolves around using her elemental skill to enhance her normal attacks, infusing them with cryo and making them hit much harder. Skirk has a passive that increases her normal attack and burst damage for every cryo or hydro team member that hits an enemy. Maxing out this passive nearly doubles the damage of her attacks, so she's highly incentivized to play with only cryo and hydro teammates. And whenever you trigger a non-melt cryo reaction, Skirk can generate void rifts which can be absorbed to give her serpent subtlety, which is just her own fancy version of energy. Similar to Mavuika, Skirk doesn't use traditional elemental energy, she uses a special energy called Serpent Subtlety. She gains this special energy when using her elemental skill, and it gradually drains over time and is completely removed if you switch off of her. Skirk's elemental burst can hit really hard, and just like Mavuika, you can use a weaker version of it or a more powerful version of it depending on how much of her special energy she has. In certain setups, you can actually open with Skirk's elemental burst and then also spam her normal attacks. If she has about half of her serpent subtlety, aka special energy, then you can press her skill to get more energy, switch off of her and do your regular support rotation, then switch back to her and use her elemental burst, and then use her elemental skill to spam her normal attacks. Skirk is very flashy and hits very hard, but she is one of the most restrictive 5 stars we've seen in a long time. So is Skirk worth your primo gems, or does she need to stay in the void? It's time to give Skirk a rating. Skirk's personal damage is great. She does almost as much damage as Mavuika in her premium teams, which is really impressive, but that's with Farina and Escoffier. Without those two, her damage is still pretty good, but it is a lot weaker. Skirk with Farina and Escoffier is one of the strongest team setups in the game, but Skirk with only free-to-play 4-star cryo and hydro characters is just so much weaker. But even in a free-to-play team setup, she still does a lot of damage. However, in difficult endgame modes, she will not feel that strong without her best supports. And speaking of supports, Skirk's support capability is bad. She can be a burst support, but if you have Skirk, you're really going to want to play her as an on-field damage dealer. She's already going to be in a cryo and hydro only team, since her damage in a melt team or really just any other team is just so much lower compared to a cryo and hydro only team. So to get value out of Skirk, you do need to play her as an on-field damage dealer, even though she can be used just as a burst support, and having a team that needs to be built around Skirk is typical for an on-field DPS, and it is nice that she can be used in a double DPS setup or a double nuke setup with someone like Ayaka or Nouvellette, but I would not use your primo gems on her just for this purpose. Skirk's team flexibility is bad. Skirk's cryo and hydro only teams are so much stronger than any other alternative that there's pretty much no reason to use her in any other team setup. Even in a full sub-DPS burst setup, she still does more damage with Cryo and Hydro only characters because her Void Rift multipliers actually make her burst stronger than the multiplicative damage you would get from a melt reaction. This is one of her biggest weaknesses, and considering she's also very reliant on characters like Escoffier and Farina, her teams can be even more restrictive. Her free-to-play friendliness is okay. Her team restrictions are quite annoying, especially for a lot of free-to-play players, but they aren't too difficult to actually meet. Even if someone is just starting out, they'll at least be able to use Kaya and Barbara with Skirk, even though it may be far from ideal. Skirk's best teammates are limited 5-star Hydro and Cryo characters, and that makes her pretty unfriendly for free-to-play players. Luckily, she has some good 4-star weapon options like the Calamity of Eshu, a former event weapon, and the Finale of the Deep, which is a craftable 4-star sword. Skirk's overall value is okay. As much as I don't like how restrictive Skirk's teams are, being relegated to only Cryo and Hydro characters, that's actually not her biggest problem. Her biggest downside is her reliance on Farina, Escoffier, or any other character that really buffs her a lot. With Farina and Escoffier, Skirk is really strong, and with at least one of them, she's still pretty good. But without either one, she is significantly weaker, and when a character is already this restrictive, and this dependent on premium 5-star limited supports, it makes it hard to recommend her for a large portion of the Genshin player base. If you already have some of her best supports, then she's a good character to have, but if you don't, then it's better to save for someone else. Good teammates for Skirk include Escoffier and Farina, who will be in pretty much all of her teams, Yelan, Jingcho, Shenhe, Citlali, Dahlia, and Nuvalet or Ayaka for some dual DPS setups. Now let's talk about Mavuika, the Pyro Archon and Super Saiyan Biker. Mavuika is a pyro damage dealer with some support capabilities that can be played on or off field, but most of the time you'll just want to play her as an on-field damage dealer. Mavuika's elemental skill has two modes. The tap version summons a ring that does AoE pyro damage once every 2 seconds. The hold version makes her ride a motorcycle and use it to attack enemies with pyro damage that cannot be overridden by other elemental infusions. When she's on her bike, she can also deal pyro damage while sprinting. It's important to know that the talent damage while Mavuika is on her motorcycle is actually worse than her regular normal attacks, but this is by design because her elemental burst will greatly enhance their damage. Speaking of her elemental burst, it deals a ton of damage on its initial hit, and it also gives her motorcycle form an attack bonus based on fighting spirit. Rather than using energy, Mavuika gains fighting spirit whenever a character consumes Night Soul points and whenever a character does a normal attack. Mavuika's fighting spirit limit is 200, but you can use her elemental burst anytime you have 100 or more fighting spirits, but the more you have, the more damage she will deal. This is exactly why you want characters that consume Night Soul points rather quickly, because that way you can charge up her elemental burst very fast, and if you try to rely on characters using a lot of normal attacks, you might get some fighting spirit out of it, but it's really not that much compared to characters that are spending Night Soul quickly. Mavuika also has very high interruption resistance in her elemental burst, meaning that even though you will still take damage, enemies will not be knocking you around the arena. Her passive talents also focus on offense, giving her a 30% attack buff whenever you use a Night Soul burst, and Mavuika can permanently maintain this buff all by herself. Her final ascension passive increases the damage of the active character by up to 40% based on the amount of fighting spirit she has when she uses her elemental burst. To get the maximum value, you need 200 fighting spirit, and the damage bonus gradually weakens over 20 seconds. Mavuika has incredibly strong potential for damage, but her reliance on using characters that have the Night Soul mechanic make her quite limiting. So how does the Pyro Archon stack up against the competition, and is she worth your Primo Gems? Mavuika's personal damage is great. She can clear entire waves of enemies with the first hit of her elemental burst, and she also has good AoE potential, combined with the ability to do damage off-field. The problem is that it can be slow because of the Night Soul mechanic. Without other characters that use Night Soul points, Mavuika's damage potential is still quite good, but it is considerably weaker than if you can consistently reach 200 fighting spirit. And while her off-field damage from her elemental skill is also good, it's not nearly as high as her on-field damage potential, which doesn't feel great if you really want to use her as a support for a character you really like playing, but she ends up dealing more damage than the character you want to play in the first place. Mavuika's support capability is good. Mavuika doesn't dethrone Xiangling as the off-field pyro damage queen, but she does offer good off-field AoE damage, a very strong elemental burst, even if you just use it for the massive initial damage, and a passive that increases your active character's damage. The problem with Mavuika as a support is that her on-field damage is just so much higher than many other characters, so that means it's often much better to play Mavuika as your on-field damage dealer and just build a team around her that supports her instead. Mavuika's team flexibility is okay. Mavuika's teams are harshly limited by her reliance on characters who consume Night Soul points, and while everyone can get Kachina for free, you'd still want another character on the team who uses Night Soul points to get the most out of Mavuika. She can be a decent off-field support for Kinich and Mualani, but her best teams will revolve around maximizing her damage. And since her charged attacks in her burst enhanced motorcycle form do massive amounts of damage in a short amount of time, that means that characters like Xingqiu and Yelan are unfortunately not a good option for her. This is a shame because these limitations make her the least flexible Archon, although she still does well in a variety of teams, particularly with characters from Natlin. Mavuika's free-to-play friendliness is okay. She has some good free-to-play weapon options, including the Tidal Shadow and Earthshakers, both craftable 4-star claymores, but her best free-to-play weapon is the Mailed Flower, an event claymore that increases her elemental mastery and attack. While her free-to-play weapon options are good, it's really her lack of free-to-play friendly teams that holds her back, as most of her best teams will use multiple limited 5-stars with few substitutions for free-to-play players. Mavuika's overall value is good. Mavuika is a very strong damage dealer for anyone who pulls her, but her reliance on teammates who use the Night Soul mechanic greatly reduces her team flexibility and overall versatility. And because so much of her kit's power is focused on her personal damage, I can't recommend people use their hard-earned Primo Gems to wish for her just to use her as a support. But if you have characters that consume Night Soul points already, particularly Xilonen, then Mavuika will be a very powerful addition for anyone seeking an on-field damage dealer. Good teammates for Mavuika include Bennett, Chevreuse, Xilonen, Citlali, Rosaria, Farina, Mualani, and Kinich. Now let's move on to the mountain-grown thicknicity that is Shenhe. Shenhe is a character that is specifically designed to buff cryo damage. Her playstyle revolves around icy quills generated by her elemental skill. Icy quills increase the amount of cryo damage you deal based on Shenhe's attack, but unlike other damage buffs, Shenhe's icy quills disappear after 5 or 7 hits of cryo damage depending on whether you press or hold her elemental skill. Shenhe's elemental burst does a little bit of damage, but it also decreases enemies' cryo and physical resistance, and she has 2 more passives that help you deal more damage. Her first passive ability increases your on-field damage dealer's cryo damage by 15% when they're inside of her elemental burst, and her second ascension passive will increase your character's skill and burst damage if you press her skill, or it will increase their normal, charged, and plunging attack damage if you hold it. Shenhe brings good value for cryo characters, but she's not much of a universal support. So how does this Icy Exorcist stack up? It's time to give Shenhe a rating. Shenhe's personal damage is okay. Even though it's common for Shenhe to have really high attack, her talent scaling is really low, and that makes her personal damage pretty low as well. She wasn't meant to be an on-field damage dealer, although people who really like her have sometimes built her as one. Her support capability is great in a team with a strong cryo damage dealer, which is the niche that she was designed for, but it's lackluster elsewhere, being okay at best. Her team flexibility is good. She might seem fairly limiting at first, but she does well with pretty much any cryo damage dealer. Skirk, Ayaka, or Escoffier are some of her best teammates, but she also performs well in reverse melt or any team that could use some extra cryo damage. Shenhe's free-to-play friendliness is okay. She wants a lot of attack, which means she really appreciates a 5-star weapon, but the higher than average base attack on the Favonius Lance makes it a nice 4-star free-to-play option for her. She can also use the event spear, the Tamayurite no Ohanashi. However, at the end of the day, Shenhe is more of a luxury character, and often the most replaceable in the teams that she's good in. She is also designed to pair best with several limited 5-star characters, so definitely not a character I would recommend someone wishing for if they're just starting out. Recommended teammates for Shenhe include any cryo damage dealers like Skirk or Ayaka, as well as Escoffier, and she also does decently with any physical damage dealers and in some reverse melt teams. Now we move on to the posh perfumer and cryptic crime scene cleaner, Emilie. Emilie is an off-field dendro damage dealer that does great when the burning reaction is present, and not so great when it's not. Emilie's entire kit focuses around her elemental skill, which summons a dendro lamp that acts as a turret to attack enemies. It launches a small dendro dart at enemies and gains 1 stack every few seconds if there's a burning enemy nearby. At 2 stacks, the lamp is upgraded and it now fires a dendro dart that hits twice and its damage is greatly enhanced. But if there are no enemies burning nearby within 8 seconds, her skill gets downgraded back to its original state. Emilie's elemental burst becomes an even stronger version of her elemental skill for just a few seconds, and then it redeploys the skill once it's done. And what's really nice about Emilie's kit is that her elemental skill has a much longer duration than the cooldown of her elemental burst, meaning that you can have 100% uptime on her elemental skill, which is great since that's where all of her damage comes from. Her passives give her even more damage, releasing a strong dendro AoE when her elemental skill gains 2 stacks from nearby burning enemies, and her second passive increases her damage against burning enemies based on her attack. She also has a very useful utility passive that massively decreases the amount of burning damage your characters take when her skill is active. And that's really all there is to Emilie. She doesn't change the burning reaction in any way, she just becomes much stronger if there's a burning enemy nearby. This is a little unfortunate, especially because her dendro application is slow and weak, meaning she is in no way a substitute for someone like Nahida. So how good is Emilie overall? Is her scent the sweetest in the land? Or will this crime scene cleaner leave you with a foul odor? It's time to give Emilie a rating. Emilie's personal damage is bad or great. When there are no burning enemies around, Emilie is basically as strong as a C0 Kale, which is really bad for a limited 5-star character. But when there are burning enemies present, she becomes up to 4 times stronger, and that's a really good thing because her damage against burning enemies is significant, and she doesn't really offer anything else to a team besides damage, so it's nice that it can be really strong. Emilie's support capability is okay. Even though she is an off-field character, you kind of have to build a team around her, because she needs a team that can consistently trigger burning, or her damage is unfortunately pathetic. So Emilie isn't actually a support, she's just an off-field damage dealer that has to be used in a specific team if you actually want to get any value out of her. Luckily, there are a lot of options for Emilie in a team because there's a lot of good pyro characters. Emilie would have been a lot better if she wasn't so limited to burning teams, and if her dendro application was way better, she could have a spot in many other teams, even at the cost of her damage falling off a cliff. But sadly that is not the case, and so she really doesn't have a home outside of teams that trigger burning. Emilie's team flexibility is okay. Emilie's mechanics limit her to burning teams, but there's a lot of characters that can work with her. These characters are mostly pyro characters, but she can also pair well with other dendro characters like Nahida, and even certain animo characters like Kazuha. However, she can also work with some interesting teams, such as Risley Melt and Farina Vaporize teams with Bennett and Xiangling. As long as they're using a pyro character to trigger burning, Emilie can work, so her team flexibility is still okay. Emilie's free-to-play friendliness is okay. While she is more limited in terms of team building compared to other dendro characters, she can easily work with free-to-play characters only. Xiangling alone is enough to make Emilie work, and the Dendro Traveler and several other 4 stars can make triggering burning even more consistent. Her free-to-play weapon options are also okay because she has options like the Missive Wind Spear that work well with her. Emilie favors attack way more than she does elemental mastery though, so several of the craftable 4-star spears aren't really that great for her. Emilie's overall rating is good. Emilie hits hard off-field, but that's really all the value she provides, and sometimes that's enough. But accessing her damage also requires a specific elemental team setup. If she didn't have that restriction, she would be a lot more valuable, even if she didn't provide any other buffs and just did damage. So even though Emilie has great potential for damage, the way she actually works is just frankly a bit underwhelming. Recommended teammates for Emilie include Bennett, Xiangling, Arlecchino, Klee, Yanfei, just about any other pyro character that can trigger burning reliably, as well as Nahida, Kazuha, Sucrose, Venti, Wriothesley in a melt team, and Farina. So with that said, who should you wish for in patch 5.7? Mavuika offers the most versatility and damage, and while she is tied to Natlan characters, that is a lot less of an annoyance than Skirk, who has even fewer team options than Mavuika. And while Skirk is a very strong damage dealer, she really only is someone that I would recommend if you already have Mavuika, because her damage is a bit lower than her, and the restrictions that she has makes her less flexible overall. Her restrictions also make her a lot harder to use in places like the Imaginarium Theater, which is already an overly restrictive game mode to begin with. Emilie is a great option if you're a Kinich main and love playing him, but honestly Mavuika is also a great choice for Kinich teams and who I would recommend getting instead. Emilie may do more off-field damage than Mavuika, but Mavuika's elemental burst still hits very hard, and the fact that she deals Night Soul aligned damage can be really helpful against enemies like the Papilla that have a Night Soul ward. And of course you can always build a team around Mavuika if you don't want to use her with Kinich, but Emilie has a lot less versatility. Finally, Shenhe is the most luxury character in patch 5.7. She's really useful in a team with cryo damage dealers, but she's also the most replaceable character in those teams. For example, if you wanted her for Skirk, but if you didn't have Farina or Escoffier, both of those characters are much more important for Skirk's teams, and I would recommend saving for them instead of wishing for Shenhe. So out of all of the 5 stars coming in patch 5.7, I would rank Mavuika as the highest, then Skirk, then Emilie and Shenhe if you can play them in their niche. But if you're still not sure who to wish for, you can drop by my Twitch and YouTube streams and ask me personally. My stream schedule has been a bit irregular due to a family crisis, so make sure you've got your notifications turned on so you don't miss out. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have when I'm live, and I would love to see you there. That'll be it for this one, everyone. Let me know who you're wishing for in the comments below and ask for that sweet, sweet shark luck. I love you, everyone. Stay jawsome, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.